I'm going to introduce this panel called Hands-On Experiences of Participation in Culture. When we were designing, drafting the program of the conference, we thought that the relationship with the audience incorporated different elements. On the one hand, that connection with the audience, interactivity, inclusion, of course. And then the last step was to put audience at the heart of cultural organizations. Those cultural entities had to be public. Yesterday we chaired a panel. Britalel said something about take back control. That is to give the power to all the users. So participation is a key issue for cultural democracy. To deepen in this concept, we have invited 3 speakers, one representing Theatre Forum, the project Be SpectActive, and Adinera Zaragoza, which is a local experience, very interesting and very popular, to explore different empowering forms, individual empowering and collective empowering, proposing a more active citizenship in our projects. To introduce and chair this panel, we have José and Insa. You have a very complicated position, José Ramón, technician of the Department of the Programs and Networks. In Zaragoza, he has large experience in the field of cultural management, cultural cooperation programs with Ibero-America, and he's also very active in cultural events and programs. Now he's responsible for Espacio Nexo, promoting community cultures in the framework of Zaragoza Cultural. Thank you very much, Juan. Thank you for attending this panel. Well, the competition with other workshops is competition, is hostile competition. So the fact that you are here, we have to thank you for that. As Juan has already introduced me personally, he has saved me some time. I wanted to make a presentation of or introduction of the 3 projects. Buffalin writer used to divide the writers between cave and convex writers, so I retake that metaphor, I reuse it and remix it, and I think that within our working atmosphere there are cultural models that are all very opposite as well. The concave models, for example, we put them like this, and if you see how they work, and you imagine them, you imagine like water falling down, and then they are full up. No, these bowls are filled in, and when they are over the top, then the water goes over the sides. So these are the models of concave culture. They only give away whatever is in excess. However, convex models looking downwards, when the water falls down, it expands all along the surface and disseminates it without owning anything. So those models allows things to flow. I think the models that will be introduced now have a lot to do with convexity, because the surface will distribute, will sprinkle the society, and will refresh the inner part of the bowl. We can start now with Inés. She's a guest, but she was the first one taking the seat, so she will have the floor the first then. Thank you, Inés. Thank you to the organizing committee for having invited us to be here and letting us be here to share our experience. And thank you for being here, to you all. I am Inés Bebea. I work from Association Ondula, ondula.org. You can find online videos, materials, resources, guidelines, so on and so forth. I come here to tell you about Teatro Foro Cultura Digital. We are an entity looking for or aiming at the promotion of a critical culture. So we start by asking ourselves about the technological culture we handle or we have. Not an easy question, but there are many elements that are at stake. So, for example, people think that technology is neutral and digital neutral technologies as well. However, if you reflect upon that, the richest companies worldwide are Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. Do they ring a bell? Do you know these companies? And these are the wealthiest companies worldwide, but even richer than pharmaceuticals, for example. Technologies they design, although they are technologies for communication, they are also technologies for something else, so they cannot have a neutral design. We can also see that culture is embedded with consumism. We consume devices, we buy devices, we buy or consume network resources, and we consume time, lifetime. This affects us all, of course, in the way we relate to each other. Or we choose the way we want to live. These are the questions focused on this project. I don't know whether you know Teatro Foro. Teatro Foro is a technique inherited from community theater led by Augusto Bogal in Brazil in the 70s. It is a theater with the following aim. People performing at that theater are representing situations of their own lives and somehow analyzing the reality and looking for ways to get training to transform their lives. So Teatro Foro, in the final performance, you come to a performance, you will see a theater play performed, staged, and when you understand the topic addressed, then the audience is invited to participate. Well, it's not they are invited, it's rather it is compulsory that they participate because the audience has to change the result or consequence or final end of that story. And then there is someone chairing that performance. We have handled many topics. Usually we focus on digital culture. Two specific experiences as a way of example. In Mediana Prado, in Madrid, the first play we staged, we decided to work on whether internet services are for free, then you are the price. And the play was called Mercaderes de Datos. There was a development that allowed us to understand the business logic, how we accept some terms and conditions, and then the audience could participate to change the history, the story, the script. The benefits of this process is when you socialize a research in a participatory way, so the audience is learning as things evolve, and also the group of people performing, acting, and they have created the script of the story, the storyline, They have interiorized concepts, they have looked for sources, contrasted information, and they have experienced the artistic experience from inside. So if we want to answer the question, what is the technological culture we have, we want to give the possibility to the audience to generate their own discourse and not to assimilate the predominant discourse, because that one would come from Silicon Valley probably. We have done so with adults. Usually, participants are linked to education, scientists, engineers, people linked to social intervention. And then also another experience we have done was at the youth center of the City Council of Majadahonda, a municipality next to Madrid. We have worked with youngsters. We have worked on bullying at schools, bullying online. So with a group of youngsters aged 15 to 18, we promote a process by which they tell their reality. They try to find why things happen, why violence happens, what things happen at home, at schools, and what things happen in terms of design of technologies they use. We can think through the body. For example, with youngsters, we work on Instagram. They manifest that is where they are. And from education or cultural scenario, through Instagram or the social media, we contact these young people. However, we try to find another line of action. You are there, you have knowledge, you have experience, let's assess it to try to analyze your situation. Another dynamic we have been working on is, okay, let's put the name on the functions of Instagram, stories, lives, whatever. And then they become a function of the tool, and they represent it with their own bodies. It is a way of seeing the impact they have on us. If someone has published this, or someone has done this or the other thing, well, instead of just looking at the screen, this is what is happening to me, to my body. We look for a critical experience, awareness raising, so that they generate their own criteria. And why do we use artistic language? Well, because that allows us to fight against the ways we use technology. If you put somebody into it, you are aware of corporal movements. They develop skills, communicative skills, listening skills, dialogue. We want to generate dialogues. This work is framed in a line of action of critical digital thinking. We have also designed materials, as for example this guide, focused on technologies. But what we wanted to do was to try to organize some of the digital terms that are being handled. Some people may say, well, addictive design of applications rings a bell, but they don't really know what it means. So we have tried to generate a framework to organize all those new terms or ideas. that are being coined. And then on the basis of our experience, other things have come up, as for example, the labs, the laboratories. There are other labs, citizenship labs, maker cultural labs.
Y, por ejemplo, también un poco a raíz de nuestro trabajo en esta línea.
And as a result of our work and collaboration with a lab near San Sebastian, Basque Country, last year we participated at a workshop to generate thinking, and we published this book, The Voices of Technology. The question was, what is the culture at technological labs, and whether that culture is illustrated the predominant culture at great technological corps or corporations. And our main aim, always present in our works, is to generate our own discourse, our own culture. I have mentioned our project Teatro Foro. Literacy line of action is also very important. The line promoted by Freire in the 70s, the idea that literacy can be a mechanical process, M and A is ma, for example, whatever. That can be a very mechanical process, and that has impregnated some ICT classrooms, no? Let's learn competencies. Yeah, but maybe citizens can also think technologies and not just take it all for granted. The technological scientific knowledge, people think that that is only for experts. No, that does not have to be the case. There are many things we can think as citizens. We have a right to think, and we have to claim for that thinking, to demand other technological ethics. I don't know how much time I have left. Am I okay? Can I leave it at that? I leave it at that, and maybe later on we can discuss the topic. Thank you.
Bueno, ya voy.
Okay.
Por favor.
Gracias.
Yes, thank you.
A ver si funciona.
Let's see if my presentation is here.
¿Es esta? Sí.
Cuando os encontréis en un encuentro como este y no haya un momento de esto.
When you are at such a meeting and there isn't any problem with technology, please write to me, because that will be like the wow moment. Thank you very much for having invited me to be here today. It is a pleasure to share experiences with other participants. I am Giada Calvano. I am researcher of the Cultural Management Program, University of Barcelona, and I am here to tell you about SpectActive.
En breve, solo para ubicarnos un rato,
SpectActive is a European project of co-creation, co-production, co-programming, and action research focused on the development of audience in stage arts, contemporary stage arts. Objective to experience with new participatory models involving artists, audience, and cultural organizations in equal conditions. Co-funded by the program Creative Europe. First phase started in December 2014 and in November 2018, but we've been lucky enough to get another 4 years of work, 4 more years of funding. Interesting.
El coste total son 3.500.000 euros.
Total expenditure, 3,500,000 euros. We have 8 partners in other countries. Most of them are festivals or research centers, universities. SpectActive is focuses on these 4 areas: participatory programming, based mainly on the creation of local groups of active audience or spectators. Then we have creative residencies, thanks to which innovative European creators work with local audiences and carry out co-productions. Web platform, production online of videos and performances, with interaction of artists between artists and audience, and always in using ICTs, and then action research. This is a singularity of our project. In these projects, European projects, generally speaking, people talk about co-production, creative residencies, but it is also interesting to have the point of view of research into play. We are observers of all these processes, and let's see what we have done in these 4 years. Participatory programming, more than 1,000 active spectators have participated, selected 108 performances or shows. These groups of spectators meet periodically, and depending on the theater and the festival, they meet more or less often, and they have different motivations as well. In this case, we have the visionaries. It is an active group from San Sepol in Italy. They started in 2006, before SpectActive, but it is interesting because they have evolved, in a large way. In Europe, they started being just 10 people from a little small village, and in these 12 years, more than 160 people have participated in a village with only 16,000 inhabitants, so it's really good. And age, 16 years of age to 70 years of age. So in this case, motivations to be part of this active spectators group are very different. Just for mere curiosity towards theater, or also because they want to socialize.
Me muevo demasiado, soy italiana.
I move a lot, I am Italian, sorry.
Entonces, que tienen motivos de socialización, por ejemplo. Otro es el caso, por ejemplo,
Other, for example, Sibia in Romany, active spectators there are students of the master course of theater, so the main motivation for them is a professional motivation.
These visionaries have created a network which is called Italia Visionari in 10 different festivals, theatres in Madrid. In Italy, rather, they have created a place where they organize these events. And some unexpected effects. There have been 14 visionary groups in Portugal too, and in York in the UK. So this is one of the unexpected effects of the projects that has reached a European level. We've got the creative residences. In this case, the artists have done 56 residences in different cities, each artist did 3 residences and then 21 co-productions. And once they carried out an artistic creative residency, these artists interacted with the local audiences on topics of interest for the artist. And in this case, on the screen, we can see the residency in Budapest, Revolutionize, and she studies the concept of what it means being different today. But there are other projects, very varied projects. We had an Australian, Con Ayla Mateloan, with his Mercenary project, investigated football allegory of the exploitation of how the immigrants are exploited in Qatar. Very different topics, as you can see. But the interesting part is the communication, the inspiration, the dialogue with the local audiences. The web platform. The web platform, whenever there's a creation, in this case 9 online video dance shows with 130,000 views, we can see how there is interaction online with the users, with the audience. Use text, image, videos, music. And this was one of the parts of the project which was one of the most difficult parts, because the digital interaction can, of course, be useful, but in these topics, the interaction had to be more driven. This was a project, a video dance project. You can see 2, the choreographer with the dancers, 2 residencies, and we worked with a local filmmaker who filmed and posted the video on the internet. This is relative to the digital part. We've held 4 European Spectators Days. This was one organized per year, involving 350 participants. And the event connects groups of local spectators, citizens at the same time as the team, and they discuss the theater. And at the same time, they're connected by Facebook, so they can discuss with all the different groups in the different cities that are involved in the project. In this case, the first year there were 60, and now there are more than 100 participants, and you can see the topics on the left-hand side. We talk about personal experience, or the ideas that the audience and citizens can have regarding dancing. And this is all shared. Action research. This is what the University of Barcelona does, collaboration with Montpellier University. And one of the things that we've worked on is to lay the theoretical basis. 5 international conferences were held in New York, Brussels, San Sepolcro. And following one of the conferences, a book was published, Breaking the Fourth Wall. It's not the minutes of the meeting or the conferences, but they were rewritten, and this book was published at the end of the project. Prospective audiences in the performing arts. And this really includes the results of the 4 years. Doesn't include just the viewpoints of the researchers or the teams that have worked, but also of the artists and the public, the audiences that have taken part. So it bears in mind all different viewpoints. And the 2 publications and books can be downloaded from the SpectActive.eu page, publications. I don't know if you can read this. Here we can see some of the reflections as an research team. We're going to see how the traditional roles of artist, creator that reaches the audience, and the programmer and the producer, how they can all interact in a different manner in the way that we have done in the SpectActive project. We're going to see in violet what we've done, in purple, and we can see the co-programming, one of the experiments, or most interesting experiments, on delegating responsibility was the Takeover Festival in York, which is a theatre festival managed totally by children or kids under the age of 16, so the youth project, really. It is important to say, too, that any of these ways of empowering the audience entails a change in the relationships and also in the mediation modalities. We have studied all these intersections, audience, producer, audience, programmer, and we've seen the conflicts that could arise. Another aspect, here we see a well-known model, which is from the spectrum of cultural participation to the more passive rather, to the more active level. 5 different participation modalities. But what we have noticed that you don't just talk about passive or active participation, but rather there are the things that intervene. The other dimensions, development of capacities or capacity building. To give an example, for example, the jury, they don't develop their capacities. So we've studied all of this. SpectActive 2 was started last year, 2018, for a 4-year period. And here we have more partners here, 19 in 15 countries, and we have the challenge of working with different networks. These are some of our ambitions. Some activities were already carried out in the last edition, but this time we want to work with the spectators, the European Art Commission. We're going to work with them in 8 cities. Instagram series as well. We are looking for influencers to document this path. And finally, I would like to leave a few thoughts. I know I've gone beyond my time, but on the one hand, we are seeing a participatory turn that goes beyond the individuals and the great interest in all of this. It involves, or it is the fruit of more extensive, broader changes. You'll be able to, if you read our book, you will be able to see all of this, read about all of this, not just political or cultural, but political in the sense that it talks about the influence or legitimacy. This shows that you don't have to be afraid of delegating power, because if you delegate power, you don't lose the power. We've had to work with other teams who aren't used to carrying out this type of participative processes. And finally, the process is more important than the final product. Clearly, everyone wants to reach artistic excellence, but in these practices, we have to bear the process in mind. We've had partners with different backgrounds. Some have been working on participation for many years, and others who were new to all of this. The most important evolution has been noticed in organizations that had never carried out this sort of practice before. Finally, the last sentence is the last slide. It's the last slide. It comes from the book by François Matera, published in January. It says that art doesn't change the world, but it changes the people who change the world. Participatory art empowers and emancipates, strengthens community. It is a sort of expectation in the uncertainty. Thank you.
Diego, tienes un minuto.
Diego, you've got 1 minute. Diego. Oh, yeah, a couple of minutes. Let's have a look at my presentation, if you don't mind. Do we want to save the changes? Yeah, we'll save the changes. Oh, very stressful, all of this. I'm going to start by thanking the organizers, and please forgive me if I spend some time breathing. I've got an awful cold, so I'm sorry about that. And could I have a bit of technical help, because I can't see where my presentation is? The original idea was to talk about the project that I coordinate in Zaragoza, and as we visited that place yesterday, and many of you know have seen it before, and after seeing the profile of the day, I thought it may be better to contextualize the general viewpoint of this idea of participation, community culture, and mentioning some of the projects that we are developing, divided between the Department of Culture and the Harinera. I've brought some drawings with me that I prepared some time ago. It's not to do with to put us into context. It is true that over the last decades, culture has become an economic resource, and that has affected all the cultural areas, and also the budgets, of course, the budgetary expenditure. And there are two things that I'm interested in when talking about culture, which I think are relevant. We've lost the ability to talk about what we are without referring to ourselves as a cultural sector. We're not an ecosystem. And talking about the global context, we're referring to citizens as audience or public. Let me breathe a minute. That's a breath. And the meaning of this is it's an activity related to consumption. It has to do with a kind of clients or agents, curators that are out there. And it is difficult to find public culture plans that talk about citizenship and that they're not bearing in mind all these citizens that we consider as an audience. This scenario has led to, in the public institution, has left outside the budgets many practices, collective practices, cultural real expressions, experimental, that are generally those that have more to do with the problem of culture. In the culture area, we consider that the public administrations have to recuperate the idea of culture as a common asset, a common good, a right. And as the Constitution says, it presupposes the possibility of deciding upon our own culture. This is more or less the scenario. And based on that diagnosis, our main concern is to try to guarantee that right of access to culture of anybody. A second line of action which concerns us is the equity in public cultural action. Inequality is something that we talk about when we're talking about education or health, etc. But in culture, we don't usually mention it, but it should do because it is essential for us to enjoy culture. What is our city of origin? Our income, and in line with this idea, another two work lines that are present has to do with decentralization, for example, opening up to the neighborhoods, and inclusion, which was mentioned in the previous talk. And we've summed all this up as community culture. Based on these principles, I'm going to talk about some of the projects that we have been working on. Neighborhoods, creating neighborhoods. It has to do with bringing culture to the neighborhood, to the groups who are at a risk of social exclusion through disciplines such as community theatre, inclusive dance, or social circus. Here you can see some pictures of the project. Another would be Pilar Joven, the young Pilar, the festivities of the Pilar, creating a space where the contents were decided by the actual youth, where they are acknowledged and can be identified themselves. Another would be Espacio Nexo, Nexus space, community cultures open to the participation of anybody. You don't have a pedigree to have to give your opinion, and also related to other areas such as technologies, urban development, etc. Along this same line too, I would like to mention a space that has been granted over the last few years, which was the previous or former Luis Buñuel School. The last one, this is the project of the Council of Culture of Zaragoza. I'm going to talk about it a bit more. I mean, I haven't any more pictures. I'm sorry if this isn't a really good one. But along that line of citizens being able to decide on their own culture and participate, this council was redefined. To start of this council identified the projects, but now this is where the citizens can participate in terms of debate, making on cultural policies. It is a council. We have different sectoral panels. And those panels, the book, music, theatre, independently manage themselves to discuss the public cultural policies and their own problems. Each of these panels has a representative that meet together with the other panels and can pool their problems and decide on priorities for the city. And after deciding upon the priorities, the Council of Culture is called, and this is chaired by people who are specialized in participation and governance, and they meet with the representatives and they discuss the public cultural policies and take decisions. These decisions are adopted by the culture area, and based on a weighted voting system, Political groups 51%, cultural agents 44%, and the representation of the technical personnel 5%. It is a young body still. It's an emerging body. They're trying to... It has a handicap, and that is the sectoral part, which prevents the citizens who aren't professionally participating in culture from participating. But it enables the agents to take part in the decision-making and increase the right of access to culture. And the last space that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to be very brief. If anybody is interested, we can talk about it at lunchtime. This is the project that I coordinate, Harinera Zaragoza. It was a mill that closed in 2001, and after a participatory process lasting for a year and a half, opened its doors in March 2016. It is a space which is experimental shared management, including citizens, cultural agents, and the City Council of Zaragoza. We manage it by way of an assembly. Those three legs take part on an equal basis. I need just a sip of water, if you will allow me. This is a space, or this assembly, deals with all the decisions, what equipment has been provided, the programs for each quarter, criterion of the spaces, how you manage the spaces for the different activities, cultural space, and our objective is the active participation, empowerment, and the transformation of the space through creativity. We always like to say that we focus on inviting the citizens to get their hands dirty, to participate in the actual activities, to propose their own projects, and to join in with the community that is managing the space. In short, as I said at the start, the idea is to produce, consume, and decide on their own culture. I'm not going to talk that much about the management area. Yesterday, we explained this during the visit yesterday. One of the new aspects is the presence of the City Council in the Assembly, participating as another agent. And we have acknowledged that there are people or citizens that that seek spaces where they can develop their own culture. At the present time, there are about 50 people from different areas, people from the neighborhood. We've got architects, educators, artists, creators, that make up the H group or collective. Over the 3 years, we've always said that it was experiment and we could still fail, but now we've seen that it could be a successful project. 30 cities have expressed their interest in the project, how we've started up a project of this type. And as it's more local level, it's in a neighborhood proximity. Last year, we appeared in the ranking of cultural institutions more or less quite high up at number 51. We also have to compete with the Príncipe de Asturias, Princess of Asturias Awards. And we're also competing Valladolid, Mallorca, that have projects such as this. I'm going to finish now just by saying that the Harinera, what has shown is that collective experience is And sharing things is not just possible, but it has improved the results of the cultural agents could achieve. And this leads to the development of this type of center, and I think it's also been useful to introduce into a local debate the idea of community culture, accessibility, and opening up a way towards an area, reproductive area, and to recover the idea of the culture as a common good, and I'll leave it there. Well, I'll finish. These are my slides, different examples of actions we have developed, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Diego, for sticking to the 1 minute. Well, it was 2.5. We have 5 minutes for discussion and Q&A. Let me just underscore, I have a problem because for a long time I have been seeing many things, and it has been beautiful to see that from my beginnings, when we started working on community culture, then we went into market culture, and now we're starting to see community culture again. Funny circles. So we're still working on citizenship as an external object we are targeting. And however, we have it very clear that culture is like a fish bowl, and all the fish are inside, and it is very much politicized. Somehow, and in a clear way, they allow us to work on that, so it's not that dangerous. They have not told us to stop talking about the community sphere. Another thing of my concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're not creating new groups or working elites, because before people used to work with some specific groups. Not specific, I mean, because they had certain features, social features or gender features, etc. But now we are, for example, group H. You said architects, designers, artists, well, and taxi drivers. What about them? So I think that we continue dividing all the processes and generating the elites that have knowledge. Media Lab example is great, but what about all those labs? Who is inside those labs, and what is the system of those labs? I don't know. Yes, I fully agree with the discourse of making the groups more of a lead. I would talk about instrumentalization of these groups, because, well, that is not the case of all the groups, but sometimes we have to be careful when talking about diversity, because many times it is like a list. I have this one, I have that one, I have this one, you know. So sometimes it is more, we are instrumentalizing because we are including all the people I need for that project. It also depends on whether, on why you do it, no? The motivations lying behind. Well, if you're doing it because you really want to work on these topics, or for other reasons, for example, to get some funding. Yes, the aesthetic rhetoric of the community scenario should also be taken into account. And what about the struggle with the conflict? Because that conflict is not the same if the conflict happens between two groups that we can address, but where is the social conflict? Yeah, it's very interesting in our case, because it is not just a conflict inside the organization, there is a conflict on a level of consortium. So the mediation work is very important in this regard. Yes, I've given the example of Mediana Prada because part of the project was developed there, but we have also faced lots of resistances because of what I said before mainly. What is the digital culture you are aiming at, or the one that you think is modern or that satisfies some criteria? And in that space, maybe the entrance or joining of other groups is not valued. Groups that want to talk about technology, but maybe they do not have the expertise, but they are the ones who inhabit the space usually. And then on the other hand, there is a concern or a fear of acknowledging that technology is also related to politics. We are doing politics. So we faced resistances in the space. But of course, if at public spaces there isn't that room for action, a critical digital citizenship will not be found in those financing other technological strategies. So it is a matter of awareness or sensitivity, no, like Diego mentioned. Yeah, there is a standardization of creations as well. We are proposing some criteria to create on the basis of those criteria. Of course, we are changing, because we cannot be doing the same as when the wheel was invented. But those changes are the result of inertia and not the result of reason.
Por una parte, con respecto a lo que planteabas de esos nuevos grupos y esas nuevas élites.
Well, the new elites you mentioned, or the new groups. Well, in this regard, I may add that the process I mentioned allowed us to discover some cultural scenarios and cultural players, and we identified them. The H group, well, it covers people from 20-something to 70-something, people who have something to do with culture or no. It is a cultural space, so obviously there are some people who want to do something in culture, and they find this space to develop projects. And as for the standardization of inertias, I think Javier mentioned before, we have to focus on the idea of the process. I can standardize criteria, but I have the pattern of the public, and I can make decisions. If you make decisions from the public side, I think they will be much more legitimate. I am not surprised at a potential standardization, but in a more legitimate framework here and a much more diverse. Yes, the legitimacy is given by the diversity of participation. Another thing I want to mention is that we, as public officers or civil workers, and when working on those data that are requested to confirm processes, to implement projects, I think it is our duty to lie. A big lie. Yes, but the problem is that people want to assess these qualitative processes when people want figures, numbers, no? To assess it, qualitative processes in a quantitative way. Yeah, we have to legitimate everything, really. And you have to lie. Yes, that's why we have decided to go straight forward. We have an emotional survey, and the only data we are giving is not qualitative. We are explaining percentages of people. For example, we know that 23% of people who came to Arinera laughed, 97% of them met someone new, and 70% of them remember the name. 70-something% of them had a better day because they came to Arinera. So trying to include emotional aspects, emotional data. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having shared your experiences with us.
Gracias por
Thank you so much,
permitirnos pasarnos un poquito.
and thank you for the extra time. Thank you.